Live. Okay, good evening. Welcome to Smashed Live, the very first Smashed Live event. Few familiar names coming up there. What we'll do, we'll give it sort of a minute or two just for everyone to join, and then I'll introduce Dan, and then we'll get into the interview portion of the event, and then turn it over to your questions if you have any. But I'm glad to see that me and Dan are not alone. So that's great. Thank you so much for being here. I'm live from Brighton, and Dan, where are you?
I'm at home in Bath at the moment.
Okay, I was just in Bath. Not this weekend, the weekend before.
Oh yeah, where did you eat? Was it Beckford Canteen?
Yeah, I went to Beckford Canteen, which is fantastic. Yeah. Went to upstairs at Landrace.
I ate there 2 days ago.
I did it. Yeah.
What did you think? Great. Oh, I love it. It's my favourite restaurant in Bath. Oh no, sorry. Yeah, it's such.
I think they're brilliant. Yeah,
I've been a bunch of times. So yeah.
Yeah. I went to Selina for the first time, the pasta restaurant.
Yeah.
Very good. Yeah. Just really, I used to. Sorry, we'll get going in a minute. But I mean, I always used to think of Bristol as the far superior restaurant city to Bath, but I think now Bath is catching up a bit. But maybe we'll talk about that in a minute. Okay, well, let's start the event proper. So thanks very much for joining, and I'm going to introduce my guest, Dan O'Regan. I'm going to read something prepared, so you'll see me looking off screen. But Dan O'Regan is a Bristol-based restaurateur, and he owns 2 restaurants. Bank in the suburb of Totterdown, which is listed in the Good Food Guide's top 100 local restaurants, and Lapin, which opened earlier this year in the Wharfside Cargo 2 development in the city centre, about which Grace Dent said in a recent Guardian review that the French cooking could thaw the iciest of hearts and was definitely delicious. In addition, Dan writes candidly about hospitality on his excellent Substack newsletter, Notes on a Napkin, which if you don't subscribe to, you really ought to. And in that newsletter, he shares honest reflections on restaurant life, customer quirks, and celebrations of service. So welcome, Dan. Thanks very much for your time this evening. So I thought we'd start off in the most obvious place, which is in how you first got interested in food and drink. Are you from a sort of foodie family?
Not massively foodie. My dad kind of cooked quite a bit growing up, but I was just one of those kids who was kind of like constantly rooting around in the fridge. And even now, when I go back to my parents' house, first thing I do is I go to the fridge to see what I've got in, and I'm just a bit of a fat kid at heart, really. Just always liked to eat. I liked eating more than anything.
So what led you down the sort of the food and drink path professionally? How did you get into the restaurant world?
So, been quite a keen home cook, and through uni, did a little bit of cooking and enjoyed as nice of food as a uni student is likely to eat. Kind of just got interested in flavour. So I wasn't really into wine until I got roped into a wine tasting for a friend's birthday, and then I kind of got a little bit of appreciation for that. But then really I was kind of more into coffee, and a friend of mine suggested I go to a coffee shop, which Clonmers Falls, highly accoladed, absolutely amazing. Was a little bit of an awakening into specialty coffee. And then I kind of just went down the rabbit hole of that, trying to make it at home. And then just after uni, lived in Spain for a bit and was kind of wanted to go into the teaching profession, and just decided that I wanted to explore specialty coffee a bit more, barista job, and kind of went into it that way, working in coffee shops. And then I've just slowly expanded my interest into like beer, cocktails, wine, food, and just every all-encompassing tasty stuff.
Okay. And then so why did you decide to, say, open a restaurant rather than work in a restaurant, or did you work in a restaurant before you owned one?
No, I didn't. So I worked in, it was just ludicrous, really.
Yeah,
I worked in coffee shops, even then, quite a brief stint. So I did about 18 months as a barista before I went off to work for coffee roasteries, doing training and wholesale. Moved to Bristol in 2019 for a job at Colonna, which is where I kind of got started in coffee, working, doing global wholesale for their roastery. And that was the end of 2019. And then 6 months later, I was called into the office, put on furlough, subsequently made redundant. And kind of during that time, as soon as I was made redundant, I went home, messaged everyone I knew, did a bit of consulting, and kind of just decided that consulting was really an extension of just being an employee and a little bit being at the mercy of other people. So started looking for some commercial premises to just open something. Settled on bank quite quickly. And then when we opened, it wasn't really a restaurant, to be honest. It was a little bit of everything. So the idea was to just put everything under one roof that I enjoyed, from good coffee and brunch in the daytime, a very, very concise wine list, a nice little cocktail menu, and some small plates in the evening. And then I've accidentally become a restaurateur in the wake of opening that.
yeah. So this was what, 2001 you opened for a bank, is that right?
2021.
Sorry, yes.
2021. Yeah, I was only 8 in 2001. So,
Sorry.
so 2021, like kind of just coming out of second lockdown.
Yeah,
So there were still some restrictions. Still had to wear masks and still had to cap tables of 6. But when we opened, we were just coming out of that and it was easing up a bit.
yeah.
Yeah.
And bank is actually a former Lloyd's Bank building, isn't it?
Yes, that's right.
But was that sort of easy to come by at that point in time? I mean, was that one of the reasons you went for that site? Or
So I loved this. So I was looking online, loved the site. And actually, when I was working in Bristol before I lost my job, I was looking at buying a house in Totterdown. And I remember thinking to myself at the time, where would I get my coffee? Because that was pretty much one of the key metrics for
yeah,
how I would decide where to buy a house.
right.
But it was just a little bit of a limited selection in the area. But I did figure that if I was looking at houses there, there would be people kind of like me wanting either living there or wanting to move there. So I
Yeah,
saw a little bit of a gap in the market with the sites. A beautiful building, quite a prominent corner building, red brick. Um, and really the biggest bonus was that it had already been operating as a cafe bar, so it was part of the lounge group.
oh,
And it was, not fitted out to my taste, but it was fitted out as a capable of cooking and serving food and drink. And then I just kind of lucked out. It was an empty unit. The landlord was probably about to start paying empty business rates. I put in a bit of a cheeky offer to get the equipment, and then just kind of locked out and got it.
okay. And has the and I should say that you were 27 then when you opened bank, is
Yeah,
that right?
yeah. So it's just about to turn 28.
Yeah. So it's quite audacious. I mean, there probably can't be many restaurant owners are that, or first time restaurant owners are that age. I wouldn't imagine.
Naive, I think, is probably probably like a more
Yeah,
apt description.
yeah,
I wouldn't call it courageous or brave or anything like that, but I definitely didn't know what was in store for me. So I
yeah,
think my naivety probably played slightly to my advantage in that I wouldn't have done it had I known the challenges.
yeah,
But yeah, I mean, I said earlier, I kind of don't ever think about my age. I just think about the next thing. I'm just a little bit of a naturally impatient person,
yeah.
and I always want to move on to the next projects.
Are there any? I mean, you talked about the challenges. Is there any particular things that stick out in your mind from those early days during what I imagine was a very steep learning curve?
Yeah, I mean, from some of those the early Substack posts I wrote, um, the anecdotes I gave were all very much real, and it was a bit like build it and they will come. And I'm not having any big brands. and people will just get it, and the people will find us, and oh, it's only 15 minutes from the other side of town.
Yeah.
Just that sort of naivety where I thought, are people, because I'm from London, 15 minutes is nothing. I travel 45 minutes to go and get a coffee
Yeah.
when I lived in London. And I thought, oh, Clifton's only 20 minutes away. People will travel across the town. Wrong. They would not.
Yeah.
People just don't want to. Yeah, I just thought it'd be a lot easier to get people in. I also just completely underestimated how all consuming it can be. It really does like become massively your whole life. There is no escape from owning a restaurant.
Yeah. I mean, were there any sort of notable disasters or anything like that happened? Or
Yeah, there's been a couple of. Do you know what? I would say on the whole, excluding the economic climate for restaurants and lots of small businesses, excluding the economic climate of the wider country, I've been reasonably lucky. My head chef has stayed with me since day one and is now a business partner of mine. I've never had to hire any new management positions because we've either promoted from within, and we've got very good staff retention. Almost all of my team have been with us since the beginning at Bank. So on the whole, we've avoided some really big catastrophes. We've had a few pretty bad nights, people having to go to hospital when we're short staffed already, dishwasher breaking down, just all in the same night.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah. Bad services. We've had lots of bad services.
the sort of stuff you just can't prepare for, I suppose.
Oh, completely out of the blue. Yeah, completely.
Yeah. So you said when you opened, you sort of a bit of everything. I mean, did the concept develop over time at Bank?
Yeah, very much so. I mean, when I opened, I kind of took the approach that I just wanted everybody in the business to know way more about it than I did. In terms of Jack is a great chef. We had a very talented manager. We had a brilliant bartender, and they just knew infinitely more than I did about their own area of expertise. And so I very much gave them lots of autonomy in how to build out their menus. And then I probably didn't do a great job of leading at the time and directing the business itself. But as we just got a little bit more mature, saw some of the strains, we realized that we needed to focus a little bit. It was sort of charming to have a little bit of everything, but there wasn't really a focus. There wasn't much identity. And we just wanted to have a common thread. And also, operationally running 2 menus in a day is challenging for a small team. So we just slowly focused and decided we would rather do one thing really, really well rather than lots of things fairly well. And that we took maybe 2 years ago. We went full restaurant and have not really looked back since.
And the style of it is, I'm right thinking it's sort of open fire cooking, that sort of thing.
Yeah, I think maybe somewhat of a hangover from the early days where we didn't have an enormous direction. My direction was just make it delicious, which is quite vague. Suppose you call it, a lot of people call it contemporary now. But
Yeah.
we kind of, Jack said to me one day, he said, I'd love to explore cooking over fire. And I was like, I can't afford to buy the fire equipment. But I kind of the business wasn't really working anywhere at the time. So I was like, screw it. I'll take a punt. I'll buy the equipment. It might give us a bit of common thread throughout the restaurant. But Jack's cooking style itself, while it's rooted in everything on fire, every dish, including desserts, gets a little bit of fire or smoke. Is very, very, global, very global influence, quite an eclectic. Sometimes he'll be heavily sort of French influence. Sometimes it will be heavily Southeast Asian. Sometimes it's a little bit of everything, all on the same plate. And he really just cooks food that he likes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And where did you meet Jack then? How did you come across him?
So we used, the site that Bank is in used to be part of the Lounge Group. And Jack was head chefing at another site, another restaurant in Bristol. Kind of got introduced to him through a friend of a friend. And I think I sort of heard he was a good chef and invited him for a chat. And he has told me since that he only really came because he had worked in the lounge when he was like 16. He was nosy to see what somebody was doing in the site.
Yeah,
So I met him. We got on really well. Remarkably, I offered him the job having never tasted any of his cooking. Naive,
yeah,
you know, like I said.
yeah.
He turned me down.
Right. Oh well.
And then I sort of prompted him and said, look, let's go for coffee. Just tell me like what your reservations are. And he came on board. And then, yeah, after a year, I gave him a little bit of equity in the business with a promise that any future restaurants we would go proper full on business partners. And that's where we are now.
Okay. And he's also, I'm right in thinking he's also involved in your second restaurant, Lapin.
Yeah. So part
Y-
of the deal was, you know, if there was a really good fit between the two of us, I if I opened any future sites, I would give them the opportunities to put some money in and come in and join me as a fully fledged business partner. So when Lapin came up, I said to him, like, look, I'll put in some money. Do you want to get involved? It can be as much as you can afford or as little as you like, but you'll have a bit of ownership. I was like, I'm doing it anyway, so it's up to you if you want
Yeah.
to be a part owner. And he joined. So we are fully fledged business partners across both sides now.
And Lapin 2 isn't, sorry, Lapin is not Bank 2 in any way at all, is it? It's an
No,
entirely different idea.
entirely, yeah. So reasonably classic French style cooking. Definitely lots of nods to classics, but there's some slightly more modern takes on some of the dishes that you might not find traditionally in France. Um, yeah, like there's no hint of open fire. There's there's no sharing plates concepts. It's just French through and through.
Yeah. And what inspired that idea then, to go the French route?
So well, at the beginning of this year, uh, I made the New Year's resolution to work less. Uh,
Right.
and then about 2 weeks later, Matt, who owns Tear Restaurant, which you may be familiar with in Bristol, put a note in. We've got big WhatsApp with lots of restaurant owners in Bristol. He said, I'm selling Tear. Is anyone interested? I was like, well, I go and have a look, which was kind of the beginning of the end.
Yeah.
Looked around, went and got a coffee. And to be honest, within about 20 minutes of leaving the site, I did a little bit of napkin maths and mental gymnastics. And I just thought, you know, lots of the Mediterranean, European cuisines are really well represented in Bristol.
Yeah.
Tons of brilliant Spanish restaurants, including our neighbours. Lots of really nice Italian restaurants. Um, just nothing really French. And it kind of played into Jack's wheelhouse. You know, he was formerly head chef at the Glass Boat, so really classical French cooking. And I knew he could cook French food. He really loves cooking French food. We thought there was going to be a little bit of a resurgence of more classic style of cooking, aside from that contemporary. I hate to call it fusion, but like Bank is a fusion restaurant essentially.
Yeah.
And we just thought there would be a little bit of space for a French restaurant to breathe because it's reasonably unserviced in Bristol. You've got a couple of really nice French restaurants, and that's it. And they're quite out of the way as well. So thought there'd be an opportunity, big gap within Jack's strengths as a chef, and that was it.
Yeah. And Lapin is quite it's a slightly left of field name and also menu item. Obviously, it means rabbit. And I found some. I wish I had the stat with me now, Tan, but I haven't. But the volume of rabbit eaten in this country is tiny compared
Yeah.
to any other, chicken or whatever. So was that a risk? Do you think? And obviously, there's a lot of British. Affection for sort of pet rabbits and all of that sort of thing. I
Yeah.
mean, was any of that in your mind at all when you went with the name and the concept?
Um, No, not so much. To be honest, like, we've had rabbit on the menu quite a bit at Bank.
Oh,
We've always It's always really been really popular whenever it's gone on, and there's not really been any shyness about ordering it. So I didn't really, again, even 4 years in, still a sense of naivety that I didn't necessarily think it was an unpopular dish per se.
yeah.
Um, and even since we've opened, every time rabbit goes on, we do get a lot of comments. Oh, it's really hard to find rabbit in restaurants, but it sells out every time it goes on the menu. Um, it's really popular. People are really happy to be able to enjoy a rabbit dish. And in terms of the name, it's just honestly a pretty dumb reason for putting the name on. We had our first partner's tiff over the name. Jack wanted to call it escargot because it's in a cargo container.
Oh, very good. Yeah.
Yeah. And I wanted to call it Lapin because we've got little rabbits kind of emblazoned on the plates. And I actually haven't made the joke, but I just wanted to make the joke that's not a hair on your plate, it's a rabbit. I've never made the joke,
Yeah.
but it's sort of, a nod to our slightly ridiculous sensibilities.
Okay. Well, when I eventually get to Lapin, I'm definitely going to call the waiter over and say, "Waiter, there's a hair in my soup."
Please do, yeah.
See how
It's
that goes.
everything I've been waiting for. We'll probably immediately close the restaurant once that happens.
Yeah, check done. Um, so that Lapin opened. Is it April this year? Am I right in saying?
Yeah, first weekend of April. First week of April we opened.
I mean, some people might think you're a bit crazy because really all we've read about this year is, how difficult trading conditions are for the restaurant industry and
Yeah.
closure after closure after closure. Did you feel at all, trepidatious about
Oh,
opening at that point? No.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Petrified. Yeah, petrified. We had been through, to be honest, like pretty challenging first sort of 2 to 3 years with Bank. I mean, still hard, but
Yeah.
like really challenging. And I the first thing I did once I went home after putting an offer in on Tear was I do sadly have quite a big spreadsheet where I can run different models of restaurants
Mhm.
and figure out if it's possible to make the money back. And I always use quite conservative numbers. And I was like, okay, I think we need to do this many covers a week to make it work. And so I did as much due diligence as was kind of feasible. I ran it through every model I could imagine, figured out what we would need to do to make it work, and then just kind of like, let's just do it as well as we can and hope for the best, basically.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that's one thing that typifies the restaurant industry, I think, is that there is an awful lot of optimism, even in what appears to be the most dire of economic circumstances. There does seem to be this sort of optimism and positivity and sort of tenacity. But I
Yeah.
think, I mean, where do you think that comes from? Is it just a love of what you do, or?
I mean, you definitely need to love restaurants to want to own and run restaurants because
Yeah.
they are not lucrative businesses. For the most part, I'm sure some people get tremendously wealthy, maybe more so 20 years ago, but they're not typically lucrative businesses. They have always had pretty thin margins. So I do think you need to have certainly a love of ideally service and hospitality, but at the very least, food. It's massively romanticized. Lots and lots of people I know who do not work in hospitality and have never worked in hospitality still say they would love to open a restaurant or a cafe. Um, Generally, my advice is to not do that. But it's long hours, it's hard work. I think everybody goes to restaurants for the most part, or at least a large portion of people go to restaurants moderately frequently, and everyone thinks they can do it slightly better, or everyone has an opinion on restaurants, which is
Mhm.
interesting. Like, I would never go to my accountant and go, I don't think you're doing your accounting right.
Yeah.
But people do it with restaurants. And the truth is, restaurateurs and hospitality people are exactly the same. They think they can do it slightly better than the person before them in the same site. Um, and, maybe it's slightly more deserved that they might be able to do a better job. But I think it's common, even like the general public have like very strong opinions. You should do this, you must do this. And we're like that, but on steroids, because we all think we could do it slightly better.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess it's like the England manager's job, isn't it? Everyone thinks they can do that job
Yeah.
better
There's a
than
lot of
the incumbent.
armchair critics.
Yeah. I mean, that brings us that area brings us nicely into a question we've had from Harry Hughes, who I hope has joined the session. I can't see his name, but hello, Harry, if you're there. He's asked a two-part question, but it's related to the subject we've just been talking about. And he says, looking around the hospitality industry and reading the news, you see lots of great restaurants closing down despite great critical success and actually managing to get a lot of people through the door. And it gives the example of the recent closure of the Clifton in Bristol, which came as a surprise to me because that's, critically acclaimed restaurant that seemed to be doing well. So his question is, what do you think is going wrong with these restaurants? Are they being badly run? Not necessarily talking about the Clifton as an example, but generally speaking, are they being badly run, or is it simply the cost of living? And if it is the cost of living crisis, how are some places managing to thrive and open multiple locations while others are closing? So it's quite a long question, but
long question. Probably could be a very, very long answer. I do think the truth is we never quite know what's going on with restaurants. Even restaurants that are seemingly packed, that just a lot of the time they're not. Or maybe they're packed on Fridays and Saturdays. And Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, they're quiet. And it's really easy to get a table. I'm personally a big fan of a midweek lunch and dinner rather than a weekend. And not that I'm generally off on weekends. But I don't know. It's so multifaceted. I think you have businesses that are just not run well. Have you sat down and like really, really nailed down your business model? Once you have nailed down your business model, do you check the numbers? I know so many restaurant owners who don't get a P&L on a monthly basis, and they don't run through their margins or their labor costs, or they run through their labor costs and they chalk it down to, oh, it's really difficult. But it is difficult, but that sentence does not pay your mortgage at the end of the day. So you have to just adapt quite drastically. Sometimes it's working smarter, sometimes it's working harder. Sometimes they're badly run, sometimes they're just unfortunate locations and it's just not possible to make work. And sometimes it's just a little bit of it's just a bit of a fallacy that they're as busy as people think. People still come to us and say, "Oh, I can't get a table at bank." I'm like, you are joking. Like you get a table tomorrow very easily.
yeah.
And people go, "Oh, I've tried to book for weeks." I go, "Did you try on a Tuesday or a Wednesday, or did you try in the summer when it's quiet?" So places are generally quieter than you realize. And yeah, they're hard models to make work. They're just fine margins. You are genuinely like one broken piece of equipment is the difference between making a profit and a loss in any given month. And equipment breaks a lot. So
have you had to, I see quite a lot of restaurateurs saying they've had to become, their own plumber and electrician and all that sort of thing. Do you get hands on in that, or have you got someone in the business who can get hands on?
I am utterly useless. And it's why it is definitely one thing I would say to any aspiring restaurateurs is if you can learn a trade, you will save thousands and thousands of pounds. We're quite lucky. Jack is pretty handy with a lot of things and he will have a good crack at fixing them. But otherwise, we try and stay on top of servicing. It is an expensive part of the business, is keeping things ticking along.
Yeah. And what about the second part of Harry's question about these businesses that are, well, like yours, that you've just opened a second place. That you do read about lots of restaurants that are expanding, restaurant groups that are expanding. What do you think they're doing right, apart from what you've just said? What they're doing right compared to the ones that are
Do you know,
closing?
restaurants are notoriously expensive to open. You go to some places and they cost just monumental figures. Um, I know loads of restaurateurs in Bristol, and I know how much their restaurants cost, and they're like 200 grand they spent opening a restaurant, £250,000. And for like full transparency, Jack and I got Lapin fully open from scratch for 40 grand.
Wow.
It's
Yeah.
it's in the scheme of things, it's absolutely nothing compared to most restaurants. Bank was cheap as well, a little bit more than Lapin, but it is a much, much, much bigger space. You have to just be quite thrifty. Well, I wouldn't have been able to afford to do it if it had been more typical budgets of 6 figures or more. But lots of people open with these stunning fit outs and they look beautiful. We kept it simple. We waited for really good deals on both sites as well. We picked up both restaurants like exceptionally cheap. So that went a long way.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. And then just his second question, which is much shorter. If you were the Chancellor of the Exchequer for the day, what would you introduce or remove to improve the hospitality sector?
I think top question. I think I'm not an economist, so any economists in the chat are very welcome to chime in and tell me I'm an idiot. What would I remove to make my life easy, and what would I remove to make the economy work a little better? Are two probably very different answers. I think VAT is a huge challenge, not just for restaurants, but all small businesses. It's 20. Well, technically, it's a 20% surcharge, is what we charge. Works out to 18.3% of all of our sales immediately go to the government, and that's whether you already making a loss or a profit. So first couple of years of bank, we were losing money, but our VAT bill was continuing to grow, and it's like, how do you counteract that? It also makes things a lot more expensive for consumers. It's just a big price. I think I'm not naive to the fact that the funds need to be raised, but there are things that, so value added tax, massively complicated, but in essence, if something goes through a process, then it incurs VAT. So chicken is not vatable when we buy it. If we cook the chicken, it incurs VAT, and we have to charge it on top. Ready meals have gone through a process in supermarkets, but are VAT exempt for whatever reason. Some food in supermarkets that is not conducive to healthy eating or nutritious eating, it doesn't incur VAT for whatever reason, but restaurants do. So I think that you'd have to balance it somewhere, but perhaps putting VAT on ready meals would raise an enormous amount of revenue, offering a small tax break to restaurants. And it's the added benefit, they might reduce the tax revenue in a restaurant, but the volume will increase dramatically, because if they halved it, things have gotten about 10% cheaper for every single member of the public who wants to go to a restaurant. So, perhaps in overall more money would flow. That was a very boring answer. I'd probably cut VAT. Probably it's
Okay.
a big one. Yeah.
Yeah. Fair enough. I'm not sure we've got any more questions from the audience. I can't see any coming on the chat. So I'll ask you about Notes on a Napkin, which is your Substack newsletter, which is what brought you to my attention in the first place. Can you tell me why you decided to start the newsletter, and you're very sort of transparent in that newsletter about your business. So why you decided to be that quite quite so open in that way?
I'm quite a transparent person anyway. Part of my business ethos is I'm always very transparent with my staff and the people who work with me. I think if they can understand not just what to do, but why they're doing it, goes a really long way to garner their engagement. So I'm generally quite a transparent person anyway. Like I don't really mind sharing the ins and outs, but also I think, restaurants there's sort of an expectation, in service, you wear your service face and you are eternally positive. Even when a guest is rude to you or wherever it might be, you have to wear that mask. And I think it kind of slightly spills over. Restaurateurs don't want to give the impression that they're failing to their peers. And nobody likes people to be negative. At the end of the day, people want optimism, but it's just not true at the moment. It's just hard. So, I'm generally reasonably transparent anyway. Quite happy to tell people what it's like if they're interested. A lot of people aren't.
Yeah,
I'd never do it in the restaurants unless someone asked explicitly. But someone asked how it is, I couldn't lie to them. I'd say everything's amazing, and
yeah.
I'm just going to get in my Lamborghini and drive home. So no, I just can't bring myself to lie to people. If they actually ask me how it's going, I'd rather just be honest, and they might not like the answer, but that's fine.
Yeah, yeah. And do you think, since starting the newsletter, I mean, do you think have any customers, for example, remarked upon it, or do you think it's made a difference to either your customer base or to other restaurateurs, even maybe?
I typically keep like my personal social medias not really linked to the restaurants. So I've got a few of our guests at Bank and Lapin who might follow me personally. And a few of them have mentioned that they read the blog and they said they enjoy it. A lot of them generally just say, I had no idea what it was really like, is the most resounding kind of piece of feedback I've gotten. They just say, I didn't realize that it was like that. It's just fascinating.
And I think that's, I mean, we were saying earlier about people having very strong opinions about restaurants and thinking they know what's the right thing to do. But actually, there's this of people think how a restaurant works and the reality of it. And I think your newsletter is bridging that gap uh, to an extent. Would you agree with that?
I think so. I think what's been really interesting is a lot of the people who are engaging with the Substack they're quite keen restaurant goers or they're interested in the industry. And the thing that's really been interesting is so many people who I would consider very, very au fait with going to restaurants are completely shocked at how some of the other members of the public act. And, when I've done bits on no shows or arriving late, the general consensus is there's no way people are acting like that. But it's really common, just yesterday at Bank, we had, 10 or so no shows, 10 guests no show to their table. And it's unspeakable to the people who are engaging with me and the newsletter to think that they would ever be appropriate to act that way. But those people do exist. There are rude people and there are like nasty people and there are just clueless people as well who just don't know how it goes, how it should be done.
Yeah. What surprises me is, I mean, I suppose having followed the restaurant industry closely for 20 years, I suppose I'm perhaps a bit more closer to the industry than your average restaurant diner. But people have been talking about things like no shows for as long as I've been writing about restaurants, and it just doesn't seem to change. It's I don't know. It's sort of frustrating from my point of view. It must be maddening from yours.
Yeah, it's frustrating. We try and put some points of friction to try and deter people from doing it. But if someone's going to no-show, they are likely to just no-show. We try and put a charge in. Some people are savvy as to how to avoid those.
Yeah.
Some people just don't care. But, the charge is 25. We do £25 a head if you don't turn up. And it doesn't cover the cost of much at all. Lapin people spend 70, £75 a head sometimes, maybe a bit, maybe more.
Yeah.
25 quid doesn't cut it. It stems a little bit of the loss of how much you might spend on some extra staff. But no one's getting rich from no shows. No one really gets, much money from even a guest who visits a restaurant once. You need people to come back a lot. So no showing somebody once does not do a lot for the business, but being a deterrent.
So can you share the worst customer behavior ever in one of your restaurants?
Yeah, we're really lucky. Bank in particular, it's a neighborhood restaurant, tons of regulars. We've got some really nice people who frequent us, and we've got really good relationship. And it's also out the way, and it's an independent restaurant, so a little bit ratty around the edges at times. It's not some swanky fit out. We're not in Mayfair or anything like that. So we don't attract too many like awful people, to be honest. A couple of funny stories. When we were fitting Bank out, there was a guy who would walk past every day with tiny little dude who would come past every single day while it was a building site, and he'd walk in with like his little granny shopping trolley, and he would say, "Are you open?" And I'd kind of look around at the scaffolding and the builders and say, "We're not open." And it was, "When are you opening? What are you going to sell? Are you going to?" And every time it was, "Will you sell spaghetti bolognese?" I don't know why. And then one day, small development, we were having a friends and family cocktail tasting, trying out the new menu. And it was, "Are you open?" "No." "Why are there people in here then?" And he said, "What kind of food are you going to serve?" And I was, "I'm not sure yet. Our head chef is going to write the menu." He said, "Are you going to serve proper English food like spaghetti bolognese and curry and pizza?" And he actually did end up coming in when we were open, only to use the bathroom, flood it, and then try and fight our manager. So he got barred fairly bristly.
Yeah. Exactly the sort of person you don't want as a regular customer.
He was never going to be one of our customers. But he was a peculiar chap.
Yeah. I should have asked this question about 35 minutes ago. But you're not just a restaurateur, are you? So you're working the floor in your restaurants as well as running them.
Yeah.
So yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So I'd say, restaurants are open 6 days a week. And I'd say probably at the moment, I'm probably doing about 5 days of service split between the two. And then I do the other 2 days, and, I do the daytimes, and the other 2 days I just work from home.
Yeah. Just sort of running the business, basically. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. And the newsletter, is it sort of does it act as a sort of therapy for you after those 5 days in service? Does it help? Yeah.
So I do generally try and do my writing on a Monday, which is when the restaurants are shut, and so I get very few interruptions. Very, very therapeutic. When I first started, I was writing quite a lot, which I've since slowed down a little bit because I've been quite busy. But I had 4 years worth of monologue and thoughts and chewing my wife's ear off, where I had lots to say, and I'd already had lots of discussions with people. So it was easy to keep up quite a bit of cadence. Probably should have gone a bit slower, to be honest, and made it a bit more sustainable. But to be honest, I was for the first couple of weeks, I was almost writing one article a day, and then I was slowing them down. So I did just also happen to have one quiet week where I only worked about 3 days in the restaurant, and I got bored. So I started writing articles. That's how the newsletter actually started.
Yeah. Well, I think you write really, really well, and it's always a story well told in your newsletters, and I really enjoy reading them. So yeah, I hope you carry on with it. Are you okay? We said we'd sort of finish at 1:45, but we've still got an audience watching. Are you okay to continue and ask you a few questions until
Yeah, absolutely.
we see people dropping off? Um, I wanted to ask you about your thoughts about Grace Dent's review of Lapin that I mentioned at the start of the broadcast. But what did you think of it, and what effect has it had on your business?
Um, well, what did I think of it? She actually came about 6 weeks before that review got released.
Okay.
So, I mean, when it released, it obviously mentioned our asparagus dish, and there were some outraged comments on the Guardian. Why are they serving asparagus in mid-July?
Yeah.
I promise you, we're not buying Peruvian asparagus or anything like that. She came, yeah, probably about 6 weeks prior to actually writing. She probably came in May. And I don't know, it was a funny review.
Mm.
I think I scan past anything good and I just look for something slating, which didn't really come, to be fair. On that side, I was quite happy. Um, what do I think about it? I think it was really good for business, and I think it was a nicely written review. I think there are some bits of it that I found a little bit peculiar. Schnitzels will always be fried, to
Yeah.
my knowledge. And I think she enjoyed the food. She was perfectly nice when she came in. Um, you know,
Were you working that day?
I was. I was supposed to be working the evening. She came in at lunch, and I'd actually swapped shifts with someone for I don't even know why.
Yeah.
I think because I just fancied doing a double because that's the sort of thing I do. And yeah, when she came to the door, I looked up and I said to my manager, I said, "Oh, Cal, can you just get the door, please?" And I turned around and I walked straight into the kitchen. And I said to Jack, that's Grace Dent. And he said, okay. And I went, no, 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 that's Grace Dent from The Guardian. He went, yeah, I can still cook just because she's walked in. He was like, calm down. And I was, yeah, okay.
Yeah.
But yeah, you do that little dance of, she knows that I know who she is. She must know. And obviously I do know who she is. She was booked under her partner's name, so I didn't know she was coming in. And yep, she was perfectly pleasant. I tried to ask her what she thought of the dishes. She said they were nice, but not a lot more than that. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
So quite well behaved then.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Have you had any of the other critics in yet to
No,
either restaurant? No.
no, do you know what? It was a complete first for us across either site. So we've never
Mm.
had a national restaurant critic in to bank. So if any are listening, very welcome. Um, so we've never had any into bank. So yeah, it was really nice. It was a nice first for us.
Yeah.
Like Jack said, can I pick up a copy of The Guardian because it's his first ever national review? So I've got 2 copies sitting on my desk. And yeah, it was a really nice thing to experience.
Yeah.
So
I
yeah.
mean,
And
often what you. Oh, sorry, come.
whatever people think about reviews, they can be enormously powerful for restaurants. And we were lucky; we were already quite busy, even in the midweek, and it just turbocharged, went absolutely bonkers. So
And has that been a lasting effect, or was that?
so far, yeah, I mean, the first week it came out, it was also graduation week, so it was nuts anyway.
Yeah.
And frustratingly, you can't be busier than full. Otherwise, I think we could have. There probably was scope more people wanting tables,
Yeah.
but you kind of have to work with what you've got. But it's still really busy now. Really, we're lucky. Like Lapin is really busy at the moment. Even throughout the week on Tuesdays, we're pretty much fully booked, which is a really fortuitous position to be in because a lot of restaurants aren't.
Yeah.
And the way we see it, you can never place too much weight on these reviews because if you give too much weight to the good ones, you'll also give too much weight to the bad one. And there will be bad ones. People will not like our restaurant, and that will happen. Hopefully they're not national restaurant critics, but you can very easily send yourself into a spiral by placing too much weight on either the good or the bads.
Yeah.
What it does for us is it gives us a new audience who will come to the restaurant, and it gives us an opportunity to give all of those people a really great experience, and hopefully, get them to come back again and tell their friends. So it opens a lot of doors. I don't think you can ever put too much weight on it. It's lovely to get a nice one, and I'm very proud, but you have to sort of sense check yourself. Otherwise you just will go mad going
Yeah.
forwards.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it often happens that the critics sort of follow each other around the country, so you may well find that Grace's review, triggers others to follow in a
Perhaps, yeah.
footstep. When they, yeah. Well, what
Perhaps.
about do you personally read the critics and take notes? Do you follow their recommendations or?
Generally only if they come local to me. So
Okay.
if there's a restaurant that ends up in the national press that is in Bristol or Bath or Somerset, I will make an effort to go and visit. But I mean, like William Sibyl's just done Landrace, but I've been going to Landrace for years and I love it.
Hmm.
He also did Juliet's and Stroud, but I've been get there a couple of times already. So, if it's local, I will definitely try and seek it out.
I guess being in the business, you probably got the heads up on
To an
the best
extent,
places before
yeah.
the critics have heard of them, I guess.
Yeah, perhaps. I mean, I think, lots of people in the industry are reasonably clued up. I would say that I try and stay extremely in the loop with new openings and what's going on all over the place. I know where lots of chefs are working, where they go, when they're leaving, when they're moving. I'm more than restaurant critics. I read loads of industry newsletters and just try and stay up to date. I just find it interesting to see what people are doing, really.
Yeah, yeah. What about is there anyone in the restaurant industry at the moment that inspires you or you look up to or you think is doing something really good?
I think they're perhaps quite cliched answers, but there's probably three people that I think have inspired me on a really significant scale. The two Americans, Danny Meyer, who wrote Setting the Table, prolific restaurateur in New York, and then somewhat of an understudy of his, Will Guidara, who bought 11 Madison Park off him, turned it into what was considered the world's best restaurant and 3 stars, and wrote a book called Unreasonable Hospitality. Those have just been absolutely, transformative for the way that I look at restaurants and hospitality generally. They're massively, team first, guest first, really creating very evocative and emotional experiences. And then Jeremy King, again, like another living legend of restaurants. So, they just seem to understand what makes restaurants tick beyond just serving nice food. So much more than that.
Yeah. I mean, I am going to name drop here, but I met Danny Meyer in New York quite a few years ago now,
Oh, cool.
and he toured me around. It was just when the Modern first opened, and he
Yeah.
had, I think at the time, he had like 3 or 4 restaurants in the Museum of Modern Art in New York,
Yeah.
and every single person we met, he knew the name of and had a conversation with. So whether it was, the cleaner or the head chef or whatever, he knew everyone. It was
Yeah.
just so impressive.
It's not,
Um,
it's, you can't fake good hospitality. I don't think you have to genuinely care about not just the people who are paying the bills, but the people who are working with you and the people who are outside your restaurant who might stop for a chat or who are local walking by. They might never come in, but you have to genuinely be a people person, I think.
yeah, yeah, no, absolutely. And what about a restaurant that you haven't been to yet but are desperate to go to?
I'll give two in Bristol, Wilson's, which shamefully I've not been to.
Yeah, yeah,
I really need to because consistently lauded as one of the best in Bristol. Obviously, recently just won their star. I feel doubly bad because Jan has been to Lapin and that's only been open 4 months. So I do need to get over to Wilson's, and then I'm also dying to visit Trinity, in Clapham, by it, both upstairs and the starred restaurant as well.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. I've been to Wilson's recently, and it is as good as everyone says.
and
And I went to
it's amazing.
Trinity about 18 months ago, and it had a brilliant meal.
Yeah,
Yeah, Adam Bart's he's a legend, I think.
yeah,
Yeah,
definitely.
yeah, two good choices. So, what about you? I think we should probably wrap it up now. But what about your future plans? What can we expect uh, in the next couple of years from you?
Um, Always chopping and changing. So I mean, 2 years ago, I was like pretty close to closing bank and just going and getting a job somewhere. So who
Well,
knows what's going to happen in 2 years' time? I think at the moment, Jack and I are talking about opening a third site. Um, we've sort of settled on bank. I said earlier, bank opened on a really small budget, very much with the ghost of its previous tenants sort of in the restaurant, and it still has the layout. It's woefully inefficient. Doesn't make a great use of space. And it only really got a lick of paint when I went in. I sanded the floors and we painted and changed the tables and chairs in the bar, and that was it. So I think instead of opening a third restaurant right away, what we're hoping to do is in the spring next year, as we get to our quiet period, we're going to refurb Bank and treat that like our third restaurant almost. So we're doing a little bit of a change up of the menu in the next 6 weeks or so, where we're going to be moving away from sharing plates. Um, it was very of the moment when we opened, but I'm enjoying coursed menus a little bit more at the moment. And I make restaurants that I enjoy, which is important to me, keeps me interested. And so we're going to be tweaking up the style of the menu by keeping the same fire cooking element, and then hopefully just making the space a little bit nicer to sit, a little bit more efficient, and yeah, just improving things, treating Bank like restaurant number 3, and also making sure we don't lose sight. I'd rather have 2 really good restaurants than 3 mediocre ones. So
yeah,
yeah,
yeah, that
that's
makes
important
sense.
to me.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I think we'll wrap it up there. So, thank you so much, Dan, for your time. I think that all went pretty smoothly for a debut event. So,
Yeah.
maybe we can do it again in 6 months' time or something.
I see
Catch up with you then.
a couple of comments from Liam said, yeah, the oak. Yeah, oak is very good. I enjoy the oak a lot. I'm pretty far from being vegetarian, and I like it a lot, and it's no meat on menu. So, testament to them.
Okay. Apologies. I can't see the comments on my screen, so I don't know what's happened there. But so apologies for that.
Um,
Um,
there's a few actually at the bottom which I have missed. I can see a few. I don't know if you can see at the bottom.
I can't see anything.
Oh, well, if anyone has a question, you're very welcome to send me a message or send me an email directly. I did see a couple.
Oh, I've got them now. Yeah. 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 I'm so sorry about this. Yeah. I've got so I have to apologise because it's the first time we've done this, and I wasn't sure where the comments were coming up, but I can now see them. So maybe what we can do is, if you've got time, maybe we can knock up a post where you answer them, and I can post that on Smashed, maybe.
Yeah, certainly. Yeah,
So, okay, all right, brilliant. Okay, so apologies for that. We'll get that right next time. But okay, so thanks once again, Dan. That was great. And see you soon. Thanks everyone for joining.
thank you for having me, and yeah, thanks to everyone who tuned in to listen.
Cheers.
Thanks.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.